Peter Kirby is one of a very rare breed of investigative reporters. There's almost no such thing. His Chemtrails Exposed book is a tremendous work. It's like it's an inch and a half thick. About half an inch of that is references, and we'll talk about what's going on, but he actually documents who's behind it, and you got to follow the money. I mean, I like one of my ideas is like with the commercial airlines. Someone needs to do some forensic accounting to find out who's paying for this stuff, because all this, the baggage allowances have been restricted, so there's money, but and I also want to thank Peter for helping make this happen. He's a stellar guy. So over to you. Yay.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks for that introduction, Patrick, and thanks to everybody for coming today. I really appreciate this, and believe me, it's going to get a lot more traffic on the internet. The last one that Bruce here in the second, third, or front from the row, he videotaped my first presentation, and that got upwards of 10,000 views on the internet. So yeah, don't think that just because there's maybe 20 people here that nobody's paying attention here. The audience is listening. Okay. So yeah, I'm Peter Kirby. I wrote the book Chemtrails Exposed: A New Manhattan Project. And we can see here from the title slide, the reason I chose this image is because doesn't that cloud look like a mushroom cloud from an explosion of a nuclear bomb? Well, it's actually not. It's what happens when you dump silver iodide into a cumulus cloud. It creates that same pattern, the anvil shape they call it, and it is quite apropos because the people who brought you the original Manhattan Project after the war refocused their energies onto weather modification. And so what we're looking at here, excuse me, I should use this mic here because this I gotta bend over for this thing. Testing, 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 testing. Can you hear me? Is that coming through? I think, let me just try the other one here. Testing, testing. Hello, hello. The first one is better, okay. All right, I'll just yell, how about that? Okay, so we are looking at the greatest scientific effort in human history. And the outward manifestation of this thing are the lines in the sky. There is also huge portions of it dedicated to the electromagnetic energy, which Alana Freeland has covered so well. But the lines in the sky are the doorway into what I call the new Manhattan Project. So let's just get started. It's not gonna be a super long presentation here. I have no notes. I could go on and on about every slide in here, but I'll just try to keep it simple here. So let's start with where I think it really all started, with Nikola Tesla, where, as you know, so many things started. And he was, of course, very into the use of electromagnetic energy. He popularized it way back in the 1800s. He was blowing people's minds with the use of electromagnetic energy, things that people had never seen before. They thought he was practicing witchcraft or something, remotely controlling boats at the World's Fair and so many other things. But he wrote quite a bit about weather control, and specifically the use of electromagnetic energy to control the weather. And today's new Manhattan Project is, the defining aspect of it is this use of electromagnetic energy. So I don't think that he said that we should have planes flying over, spraying us with all kinds of stuff to increase the effectiveness of these things. He wasn't that kind of a guy. In my opinion, he was a good man, in fact, a great man. And so, I think his original concept has largely been bastardized by the military, industrial, academic intelligence complex. Here we have Alfred Lee Loomis. I have his birth and death, but it's occluded, I like that word, by this little thing with the arrows and the garbage can. Anyway, he was born in 1887 and he died in 1975. Alfred Lee Loomis was a Wall Street banker turned scientist. And he is a very intriguing character because he was doing a lot of the same things that Nikola Tesla was doing with electromagnetic energy. And, but he was highly connected to the Manhattan Project, the RAD lab at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which was a wartime effort that developed radar that helped America win the war. And I think that possibly the New Manhattan Project may be a Loomis family secret. He was deeply embedded in the military-industrial academic intelligence complex, and his son, I forget his son's name now, but his son became a member of the board of directors of the MITRE Corporation in 1978. And my research indicates that the MITRE Corporation is the day-to-day manager of today's New Manhattan Project. So yeah, there's been a great book written about this man. It's called Tuxedo Park, written by the daughter of James Conant, who was a Manhattan Project scientist. And he conducted all kinds of scientific experiments. He had people coming in from all around the world. I believe Einstein even went there at one point, but he had top scientists from all around the world coming to his little enclave outside of New York called Tuxedo Park, where he owned multiple houses. One of these houses he turned into something called Loomis Laboratories, and that's where they conducted all the experiments. He didn't live at that house; he lived at a different one in the complex. But I think this guy was instrumental to developing today's New Manhattan Project. Here we have Vannevar Bush. Anybody who looks into these grand conspiracies knows that Vannevar Bush was basically the man. I mean, I'm not saying he was a good guy. In fact, I think he was an incredibly evil person. I've listened to some interviews, or at least one interview of him. These things are available on the internet. And in my opinion, if the devil had a voice, this is what he would sound like. He would sound like Vannevar Bush talking. I mean, I suggest that people listen to some of his interviews. He is sharp as a whip and extremely diabolical. And he basically brought us the first military black budgets, and he brought us the original Manhattan Project. He was the head of it all. He established the group, the Office of Scientific Research and Development, for specifically that purpose, to produce the first nuclear bombs. And I don't think that it was necessarily a bad thing to produce the first nuclear bomb and even use it. Okay, maybe I'm a heretic. We were at war. Okay, that's a debatable point, and but anyway, it wasn't such a bad idea to try to do it the same way that the Germans and the Japanese were doing it, a sort of totalitarian way of managing science. But hey, I mean, we needed to do something to win the war. Anyway, where I think he messed up, and when I think he did things that were not good, was after the war. After the war, he established two scientific bodies that have been instrumental in the production of today's New Manhattan Project, those being the Office of Naval Research and the National Science Foundation. If you research this topic, you will find those organizations coming up again and again. And I just was turned on to a paper written by Marvin Herndon, who agrees with me on the bastardization of science and the corruption of the scientific establishment. And I have not read this yet. I just got turned on to it. But he wrote a whole article about the National Science Foundation and how it's been used as a tool of our oppression. Okay, and then, so this was the big public rollout of weather modification. I got his name is covered up here. I don't know how to make that thing go away, but anyway. This is Langmuir, Schaefer, and Vonnegut. These three guys were industrial scientists at General Electric Laboratories. Back in 1947, science was not funded by the government largely. This was a new thing. It happened during the war when the government started pouring all kinds of money into science. Before the war, it was largely industrial labs, trying to produce new technologies that were going to be something that people would buy. And the General Electric Laboratories and these General Electric Laboratories was used as a vehicle for the rollout of weather modification technology and the beginning of the New Manhattan Project. Langmuir was the first scientist from an industrial lab to win the Nobel Prize. He invented plasma physics, which plays such a crucial role in today's New Manhattan Project. And then we have Schaefer, Schaefer was mostly a lab assistant. Schaefer's the guy bending over the cloud, what they call a cloud box. He's looking at it's a cold box, where they could measure the effectiveness of different substances as far as the nucleation properties of the substance, as whether or not they could use it in the context of weather control to make rain. Langmuir is the guy standing, the older man with the white hair. That's Langmuir. But then the most important one out of these three was Vonnegut. His name is occluded by the thing. You can kind of see it there. But Vonnegut, Bernard Vonnegut, did I say? Is that name? Yeah, Bernard Vonnegut, the brother of Kurt Vonnegut, oddly enough, went on to perform these space charge experiments, which were, you'd have a wire, an unsheathed wire, strung across the top of telephone pole-like poles for miles and miles. And you'd run a big charge through this wire of DC current. And when you do that, when you put too much charge in the wire, it starts spewing electricity. It's called coronal discharge. It starts spewing electricity out into the atmosphere. And they would conduct these experiments where they would charge the wire as clouds would be passing by. And they would also charge the wire when they would generate particles, clouds of particles. So you could see how these type of experiments are in the vein of the New Manhattan Project, today's New Manhattan Project, where they are saturating the atmosphere with particles and then applying electromagnetic energy. Back then, it was just electrical energy, but it went on to evolve into the use of electromagnetic energy. And that big rollout was in 1946. Okay, and then we have Johnny von Neumann, the great revered scientist. I don't think that there is a more revered American scientist than John von Neumann. He was a mathematician. He worked on the original Manhattan Project. He he basically invented the field of computer modeling, and they used these computer models firstly to simulate the explosion of atomic bombs to try to figure out, exactly how to build the bomb to make it explode better. But the computer modeling and the computers and the models and all this was later applied by von Neumann, not long after the Manhattan Project. It was later applied, this computer modeling, to the atmosphere. So John von Neumann, one of the most famous original Manhattan Project scientists, went on to do this work, this serious work, in the vein of weather modification and the atmospheric sciences. And it's very interesting to note that I have found the earliest examples of the theory of, not only of the theory of man-made global warming, the modern theory of man-made global warming, but also the SRM geoengineering thesis coming from John von Neumann in the early 1950s. He was not only saying that man's carbon emissions are causing the Earth to warm, he was also suggesting what we should do about it, just as the geoengineers of today are doing. They say, man's carbon emissions are warming the Earth, and we need to spray things out of planes to save you from it. This was something that John von Neumann came up with in the early 1950s, and these are the earliest examples of both the modern theory of man-made global warming and the SRM geoengineering thesis I have yet to find. So, I intend to dig even deeper into Mr. von Neumann for the second edition, which should be out. Cuts them open, and he finds they don't have anything in their stomachs. And this is because the arthropods that they feed upon, tiny little critters that are in the streams and stuff, these arthropods are just being decimated by the daily spraying. And the fish don't have anything to eat, and they're starving to death. And their numbers are way down, and everything is being destroyed. And this is what happens when you saturate our biosphere with all kinds of chemical crap. Anyway, that study I will include in the second edition. It's not really a study, he just kind of commented on it, what he was doing, but it's another crucial piece of the puzzle, another crucial piece of evidence from a highly reputable scientist. In fact, he was really the guy, when I saw him in 2010, I think it was 2010, What in the World Are They Spraying? When I saw him talking about the elevated levels of aluminum and things, that's when I really started realizing that this was going on, and it was real. And, because, everybody goes through this process, right? You hear about it. And, my reaction to it when I first heard about it was like, yeah, right, they're spraying things out of planes. That's crazy. Why would they do that? Because they're just destroying everything. But that was when I heard about Francis. There was other things I was looking at. But when I saw Francis Mangel's in that movie, that was really what clinched it for me. Here we have, this looks like a nice guy, huh? Doesn't he? It's kind of a friendly character, like a big teddy bear. He's from right here in San Francisco. Michael Aquino, PhD. He's openly a Satanist, and he tells us about how our cell phones and our computers are being jacked into to send us electromagnetic signals that control our moods, thoughts, and bodily functions. And he thinks it's a great thing. He put it in his book. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something. We got Satanists in charge. I can tell you that much. Yeah, he's with the Army. He was with the Sixth Army out of the Presidio. They're not there anymore, but believe me, I think what he is, he says he's retired, but I think he's been what we call sheep dipped. He's been put. He just says he's retired, and they put him through the process of retiring, and officially he's retired, but he's actually still working. Probably. You don't just throw someone away like this. When people become such experts in certain fields, they're indisposable, and I do believe he has been sheep dipped. I don't think he'd admit to that. We should get him down here sometime. he goes on shows and stuff. He's been on the Donahue show, I think it was, and he went on the Oprah show because he was embroiled in this whole scandal back in the 80s. Apparently, he was implicated in some type of child sex abuse thing. There you go. There you go. Yeah, Michael Aquino. I don't want to cross him. All right. Yes, another one of our friends. Good. We don't want to look at that Aquino guy anymore. He's got weird eyebrows. Here's Clifford Carnicom. He's got kind of a normal beard. But Clifford, wow, his work is really hardcore. I mean, you know, Alana, God bless her, she's all over it. I've kind of just dabbled in his work largely because it's so complex and it's so hardcore and it's so scientific. I mean, this guy is on top of it, and he's been on top of it for a long time. He was one of the earliest people to recognize what was going on here. He saw those lines in the sky back in the mid-'90s and knew immediately that there was something wrong, and he started doing something about it. And yeah, he's been at the forefront of analyzing and exposing the Morgellons phenomenon, and he continues his work today. And I do believe he will be the guy to break open a lot of biological aspects of what's going on today, and specifically the Morgellons thing. I mean, he's already done it, but you know, I think he's going to continue to be a great player on our team. And here we have the enemy, two enemies again. Gosh, I hope John Holdren is not in the White House anymore. I haven't heard too much about him. I assume that he's been fired. Just as I'm sitting in the back, I remembered that I have this slide, and it just occurred to me that I don't know if he's in the government anymore or not. Do we have a science czar? Does anyone know? I hope he's gone. Well, we don't have any czars. I don't want any czars anymore. Anyway, John Holdren and our great enemy, I won't even call him a friend, to be real, Bill Gates. These two guys are probably the two most prominent proponents of SRM geoengineering, in other words, chemtrails. They're the two most prominent proponents of spraying us in our whole biosphere with all kinds of crap. And another thing that they agree upon is death. They're also probably the two most prominent advocates for population reduction. So, you know, obviously the population reduction agenda is playing a role here. It, in my opinion, the first part of it is weather control. And, you know, a lot of the military aspects that Alana was going over. And I think it's just, you know, guys like this that kind of get off on the idea that in the context of all this, that we're all being killed. And what I have in the middle there is the Georgia Guidestones, which was mentioned by Brad. And, you know, it says we want to reduce the world's population by, you know, like, I want to reduce it to like 1/10 of what it is now or something, or some crazy thing. And, you know, it's supposed to, we've been down to 500 million from 8 million, right? Yeah, that's crazy. That's 1/16. So, yeah, they love death. They hate God. Here's a picture that was released by, was it NASA? I forget who released it. One of these government agencies, the EPA or something, in response to people realizing what was going on and petitioning their government. What does our government do? They say, "Oh, don't worry about it. That's nothing. These are contrails. Look, here's a picture of contrails." Of course, that's not a picture of contrails. Contrails don't you know? Even if it was contrails, why are they going in all these strange directions? These aren't common flight paths. You know, common flight paths, if you've seen those maps before where they show all the common flight paths, and they're kind of like bunched together in certain routes. This is just totally crazy. They're going all over the place. So, I mean, how is that contrails? Anyway, just more disinformation from our loving government. Oh, here's another example. The chemtrails have been showing up in all types of media. I have a few examples that I share in the book. If you remember this Denzel Washington movie Flight, that's normal, right? And then the Topps trading card company, has come out with this curious, what do they call it? Curious cases, the curious case of Edward Teller. I mean, the curious case of chemtrails. And let me see if I have the back of it too. There's some text on the back. No, I don't have it. But and then we have. Oh, I should mention the Topps is also coming out, and I just noticed this because I go to Amazon and I search chemtrails quite a bit, and one of the things that's been popping up has been garbage pail kids. Now they have a new garbage pail kids. It's like one of them is like Chemtrail Charlie or something like that. Yeah, go to Amazon and search chemtrails, and I think it's a new thing because it just popped up. But I'm going to order that and I'm going to include it in the book. And here we have chemtrails. See, I find this incredibly incriminating because this is not a photograph. This is something that somebody drew. This is something that somebody made. They made sure that the lines were in the sky. That means that they're aware of the lines of the sky, and then they put it into whatever they're doing. So yeah, and it's, you know, the CIA loves it because it's all just normalizing all this stuff. Here's from the office, the aforementioned Office of Naval Research. Here's their website. This is the Office of Naval Research, right? If I'm not mistaken, something like that. Yeah. Office of Naval Research. As you can see in the background, there are some chemtrails. It's kind of a low resolution image, but yeah, they're flaunting it. I mean, the ONR, as I said earlier, has been instrumental in the development of today's New Manhattan Project, and here they are on their website, proudly depicting chemtrails. See what else we got here. Oh yeah, this has been a kind of a famous article that was done when Patrick has popularized the notion that chemtrails cause these so-called sun dogs, but you know, they are, if they're natural, apparently they are quite rare, but in the context of them spraying us with all kinds of stuff every day, they happen all the time. And here's an article in The Guardian talking about geoengineering. And they got a picture of something that's produced by spraying chemtrails all over the place. And you know, they're trying to what do you call it? Soften us up. You know, they're bringing it out. They're putting up trial balloons. They want to normalize it. You know, it's just to the point where someday they think that people are just going to you know, accept it. That's the goal, and we must resist. Here's another one of the big bad guys that we're fighting against. Cass Sunstein. Anybody know who he is? Yeah. Yeah, he's a psych warfare chief. Apparently he's not working for the federal government anymore, but you can bet he's behind the scenes somewhere doing some kind of dastardly stuff. He's been instrumental in organizing online disinformation. He writes papers about how the government needs to mobilize against the citizenry who are having thought crimes and coming forward and having discussions online that expose government activities. We can't have that. And he advocates for the government going into these online chat rooms and confronting the thought criminals, making sure they don't disseminate these ideas anymore. Here's another bad guy. We got to concentrate on the bad guys because, you know, that's how we're going to win this thing. Oh, his name is like totally occluded up there. Anyway, this is Harlan Cleveland. And he was born in 1910. He died in 2000. Harlan Cleveland looks to me, and the evidence suggests this, that he was a top-level person involved in organizing and promoting the new Manhattan Project. He wrote quite a bit about weather control, and he also wrote quite a bit about a new world order and how weather control is part of an authoritarian new world order, and he was all for it. And there was a book written by somebody named John Coleman. It's called The Committee of 300. Has anybody heard of this book? And yeah, and it's quite an interesting book. I have to admit that it's light on sources. In fact, I don't know if he lists a source anywhere in the book, but he goes on and on, John Coleman goes on and on about this Committee of 300 and how it's a group of sort of world leader type people who clandestinely meet and plot such giant endeavors as today's new Manhattan Project. And in the book that John Coleman wrote about the Committee of 300, he says that Harlan Cleveland was a member of the Committee of 300. And he says that also Coleman, it's very interesting, his book. He's quite conservative, I'll warn you, if you're a liberal. I mean, he is like hardcore conservative. But he asserts, it's quite interesting in his book, that there's an executive committee of the Committee of 300 known as the Olympians, and that the chairperson of the executive committee and the entire committee is the Queen of England. Now, doesn't that make sense? I think it makes perfect sense. Oh, yeah, I'm almost done. Okay. And then I have a chapter in my book called Solutions, and here we have some things noted. I got to start looking at the audience here. Okay. If you want to not be affected by chemtrails, you can change your location. Chemtrails are not sprayed in all areas of the world. They're mostly sprayed in developed areas of the world, in the first world. The more development you have, the more chemtrails you have, basically, is the deal. So, you know, if you're really rich and powerful, you can live on a compound somewhere in some third world nation with your own private security forces and not be affected by chemtrails at all. But that's not for most of us. Or live on a yacht in the Pacific somewhere. Air purification, that should probably be at the top, because you can get not only HEPA filters, you can get electrostatic air purifiers, which will take out nanoparticles. You can purify the air in your space, in your apartment. These things cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $200, depending on the quality. Supplements. Dr. Russell Blaylock says that turmeric will clean out the portion of your brain that's most affected by the chemtrails. I tend to like the nascent iodine, detoxidine, which is something on Dr. Group's website. Dr. Group is chemtrail aware, and his website is globalhealingcenter.com. He has lots of other things on there, including cleansing and detoxification. That Dr. Group's website, globalhealingcenter.com, is my #1 choice for cleansing and detoxification. I have performed 3 liver and gallbladder cleanses, and I have passed over 2,000 liver and gallbladder stones. One of them was the diameter of a quarter. So, I mean, you can empty your gallbladder and clean out your liver, and it cleans your kidneys at the same time. These are your body's filters. These are the things that filter your blood. So, we need to be able to filter out the toxins that we're being exposed to on a daily basis. Microbes may happen naturally. Microbes are little tiny organisms that will consume different things. The microbes can even neutralize radioactive material. But in the context of the New Manhattan Project, microbes may naturally remediate our environment. There's a whole school of environmental remediation, and hopefully we can stop the chemtrails and then start getting into the environmental remediation. But microbes may also happen naturally, but they can also be produced, and you can apply them over large areas. Maybe we should spray microbes out of planes. That might be a good idea. Okay, you can do investigations like I have done, like Patrick's done, like probably all of you have done. Educate yourself. We can file lawsuits. I think the resulting from the today's New Manhattan Project will. I want to see the biggest lawsuit in history, and I think it's deserving of that as a violation of the Nuremberg Code. Legislation, you can go after legislation. Personally, I'm going about, and I will be attempting this again in my city of San Rafael. I will be going about trying to make San Rafael a chemtrail-free zone. I'm going to word it a little differently. I'm not going to use the word chemtrail, but the details of all that are in the book. You can petition your government. And then free energy. Free energy exists. Okay, the free energy technology has been around for a long time, and it's been suppressed. The oil and the gas industry, they don't want you to know that you can just draw electromagnetic energy out of the environment ambiently. We're surrounded by it. You can access it. And not only that, cars can run on water. Okay, I've seen video of this, and there's all kinds of ways. There's all kinds of alternative free energies that have been totally suppressed by our establishment. And wouldn't that take away the impetus for SRM geoengineering, right? If we're not emitting carbon from internal combustion engines anymore, then they don't have any argument, right? Okay, I'm all done. This is... Thank you. Thank you. This is the book, Chemtrails Exposed, a New Manhattan Project. It's all in here. All the little details and factoids fell out of my brain, and I couldn't remember while I'm up here on stage. But if you want the book, you can go to my website, which is included by the thing there, peteracirby.com, peteracirby.com, and you can link to the CreateSpace page and buy from CreateSpace if you buy it, because I get a bigger royalty, and they probably love me for it. All right, anyway, thanks for listening. I really appreciate everybody coming out here. This is awesome. All right, Patrick.
And thank you again.